Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
You can try John's.
Hi, sorry, I'm late.
And
Okay. Shall we get started? What do you think? See, Eric, you joined us twice.
Yes, I'm on my phone and computer at the same time.
Nice. All right, let's get started. So welcome to the CDEvents vocabulary discussion meeting. Today is October the 18th. I'm Andrea Frittoli. I work for IBM, and please sign yourself in the participant list if you would like to. I only added a couple of things on the agenda for today. Mainly, I wanted to discuss the adopting CDEvents PR, review the plan for 0.1, and discuss SDK status updates. I don't know if there are other topics. I guess we could discuss about.
I think that covers the most important parts. The service one release, of course, is important to get in place now.
Okay. We have time to discuss on the website as well. And yeah, welcome, Parth.
Hey, good to be here.
Hi, we're just about to start. So for the PR, I think, thanks for the reviews on that. Yeah, fortunately, Ben is not here today, so I think he had some open comments from him that was open to discuss. But yeah. So in this PR, I mean, Eric and Emil have reviewed it. I think I was adding some content about adopting CDEvents with some diagrams on how an incremental adoption could look like. I don't know, any general thoughts on this, or?
I think this is a great addition to our documentation, to the primer. So I think it's great now.
And this seems to be a recurring question for us, Andrea, when we have presented the event in various conferences. So I think it's great that it's covered by the documentation as well.
One thing I was reflecting on when reviewing this was arguments for declarative versus imperative events is maybe a bit thin. I think it's good that it's not too what should I say, too involved or too long clarification. But I was thinking if there was something on the CDEvents webpage that we could base our argumentation on, but I couldn't find anything. I happened to find a presentation by Clemens Waters, who is one of the founders, I think, of the CDEvents. But it's that's just an article, so it's not really something we could maybe link to. But if anyone here knows about some good pointers there, which we could use here to make these statements even more heavy, so to say.
Okay.
Might improve it. But for now, I think that we have good argumentation here, so I think it's good enough. But yeah, just mention that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, one thing that I did add in here is this sentence. So CDEvents do not support imperative events today. The specification may include imperative events in future to foster interoperability in systems that rely on imperative events today. So this is based on Ben's input and what we discussed also in the CDEvent community day. Is that something, do you think this is okay, or you would rather not have this?
No, I think it's okay. Or, well, I don't know if we should state our roadmap in relation to these definitions or what we intend to do or what not. But I think for this specific case, it's fine, I guess, to say that explicitly we don't support it right now. Yeah, we might later on, so I think that's fine. I'll paste the article I found in the chat there if you're interested to read that more in depth. And I'm not sure how much you can use it, but I don't think we should link that, but you can read it, and I think it's quite interesting actually.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks for the reference. All right. Then I think we can keep the discussion on this PR short. I think we can merge it then after the meeting, unless there is anything else. And I think if Ben has some further comments, we can do some amendments later on.
That sounds good.
Okay, so next to the project, I think we're in good shape. So this is the remaining open items. So for the release announcement, yeah, we are working on this as part of the press release for CDEvents 0.1. So I think
from our perspective, I think we're done, right, Andrea? I mean, I'm quite pleased with how it's stated there now. I think you are as well, or?
Yes, I think the current
You bring it
state
up
is,
here maybe to show it.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So this is the I guess maybe what we can do, include this in the ticket. Okay. So yeah, so the announcement goes like, okay, recently we announced the project. CDF recently announced a project, a vendor new test specification for defining format and information model of event data. Okay, and then basically we announced the first release. What it covers, events spanning from configuration, management system, CI/CD, and enough to calculate DevOps metrics like the lead time for change and deployment frequency. Features in 1.0 version schemes for all events, SDKs for Golang and Python, and we are working on a Java SDK. And we have cloud events binding, so we support out-of-the-box transport over several different messaging systems. And then links, links to the white paper. Right. Any comment on these? All right, shall I close this one then with this comment?
Yeah, I believe in that.
Okay. All right, so plan for proper CDEvents governance. You want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I can comment there. We pasted some valuable input to this governance model there a few months ago. Then when I looked into this more in detail, what we actually already have is so we have a document stating our governance model where it mentions a bootstrap committee which deals with the governance, and some of us here in this meeting are then part of that bootstrap committee as stated in that document. So I think that's good enough. I cleaned it up a bit, fixed some links, and made sure that we have references in the correct places to the governance document itself. So I actually think that this is good enough now for 0.1. We don't need to have it in a better shape for 0.1. And I think for the future, we should probably, of course, we should set up the CDEvents project as a well-defined project with a well-defined committee, steering committee or governing committee for it. But that's not really, that doesn't need to be in relation to any specific release of the protocol. I think that could be done in parallel. So I think what we have now is good enough. We don't need to feel ashamed, I guess, of what we have there. If people go to the website and see it for the GitHub project.
Yeah, thanks. I do agree. I think what we have sounds good. For the future, shall we? Do you want me to remove this issue from the project so that we track independent from releases, or we close this one and maybe we open a new one?
I think we can still keep this actually then, and maybe make just a comment in the end there, saying that this for 0.1 we have what we need, but we should instead handle this ticket on the side or wherever we put it. Yep. Yep.
Maybe what I can do is just. Okay, highlight supported use cases on CDEvents.dev. This is still missing. So I'm not sure where on the use case on the CDEvents.dev we're going to add this, I guess part of under the primer maybe.
Don't we state some sentence about that already? Actually, in the primary is it, or where is it? I've seen that. But it's not maybe as a use case itself, but maybe don't specify that. Yeah.
So we have this.
Mm.
So what I could do, I could expand on this one and say that with release 0.1, we support like the two metrics, the same two that we have in the press release, lead time for changes and deployment frequency.
Yeah, makes sense. Good.
All right. The next two, the document subscriber model for events and backward compatibility strategies. I would consider these two covered by the PR we discussed in the beginning of the meeting. All right, and then we have the abbreviation for all events type.
Yeah, I haven't done that. Of course, it's not mandatory, I think, to have in the 0.1. It would have been good, but yeah, I guess I still have maybe some time left this week to do it. But if not, I think it's fine that we leave it out. Regarding the other two, there, the terminology and the task step types. But in the terminology, I have created a pull request to the SIG interoperability repository where the terminology document is stated. Where it's kept. So I don't know. Of course, we cannot require that people review and approve that pull request before CD Summit, but still it's there. We can bring it up now and look at it, of course, to see what it looks like if we in the meeting at least agree. Right. We go to the file change. Okay. So I added the CDEvents there to the list of tools, and then below there's CDEvents section where I more or less copy pasted from our website and added some of the terms that are somewhat relevant. And then also in the end, there's a table of relating how different things are called in different tools. So I added CDEvents there with the terms that we have used so far. It's not exactly clear what all these columns mean. So if we look, for example, at the first column there where it says sync wave for Argo CD, I think that's might not be applicable for too many things. And in some sense, it could maybe be called a task in CDEvents, but then we don't have the concept of hierarchical tasks, so I'm not sure if that's valid or not. So far, I'm not sure we can represent those parts with CDEvents, actually. So either if you have any comments right now on this meeting, or if you would like to look into it and review it offline, that's fine as well.
I don't quite understand.
There are different levels. I mean, the rightmost or the third last column, something where it says pipeline and then pipeline CDEvents. So that's the highest level of activity, so to say. I think it's what Tecton calls a pipeline as well. So if you relate to Tecton down there, I guess you could maybe make more sense of it. So a pipeline contains tasks, and tasks contain steps. And then steps could contain something which is not defined in Tecton either. And we have the same for CDEvents more or less with pipelines and tasks, right?
Yeah.
It's just different levels of I would call them activities, all of them. But
Okay. Yeah, I'm just confused by the sync wave and sync phase and sync terminology. But yeah, maybe it's I'm not familiar enough.
It's Argo CD. It's not Argo workflow, so it's Argo CD. I'm not sure if we would have had Argo workflows here, what it would say. It would maybe be more interesting to look at Argo workflows than Argo CD actually. But yeah.
Okay. Well, it's only a very small surface in these tables from the CDEvents terminology.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to have all of these in here, I think.
And those are taken from the primer, more or less word by word. So it should be fine.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I think I would say that from what we need to do in 0.1, this is good. I mean, as you said, we cannot control when this is merged, but I don't think it should be anything controversial in any way. It's just us CDEvents as projects say, okay, this is how we call things.
Yeah, I think the intention is that whenever SIG interop sets some kind of de facto standard or some kind of recommended terminology for each of these different columns that we saw in the table, then I think CDEvents should align with that. But before that has happened, there is no reason to push this even more, I think.
Okay, yeah, makes sense to me.
And the thing about the taking advantage of the list task step types, that's more about how we call the different types of tasks. For example, build, deployment, release, publish, deliver, whatever. And that's a related document in the or another document in the same SIG interoperability folder, but that document doesn't contain any tools relations, let's say. So we can't really state there what how CDEvents is conformant with those terms, but of course we are not fully conformant with them, I would say. I'm not sure what we intended with the the ticket was written by Anne-Marie, I think it was, right, from SIG Interop. We just added it to the release now, so we should have some statement on how good or bad we are conformant with the other those terms. So this is the tools document, but the pipelines terminology. If you open the pipelines terminology document there,
yeah, I was looking for
that's so that's the stages and step types on those. So here I think it's, build is one, build stage is there, for example, and we have test stage. I mean, we call things build and test. Well, we say test suite and test case, I think. Anyway, and we have deployment. So yeah, we are more or less in line with this, but maybe not fully. And for sure, we don't have events for all of these. If we think we should have, that's another discussion, I guess, but we're not too far away from using these same terms anyway.
Yeah, it looks like we're pretty close, at least to the main stage names. That we don't have for these. But we do have build, test, and deploy.
So I don't really remember now. Did we put any comment in that ticket that we added to the project of our or the other ticket? No, but
this one.
Yeah, this one. Yeah. did we write something in the end here on what we intend? This was written by Anne-Marie from SIG Interoperability Group.
Yeah.
We have had some comments, but the last comment was quite old, I think, here in June or July, maybe. What or July? Yes, I 0.2 we should be more in line, but so the first paragraph there states that we will probably not be aligned with this 0.1, but maybe 0.2. So the question is what we need to do for 0.1 now then, if we actually need to do something at all about this, or we must have had some thought when we added this to the project on September 12th down there. And I was assigned to it, so I should probably know.
Yeah, no, I think what we said is that we could make a statement in the spec saying, okay, we are aware of this work from the SIG interoperability, and then we plan to work on it in the next release. I think that's what we discussed.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. But don't we already have something like that actually nowadays? Or am I mistaken?
I'm not sure.
Maybe I should look into that and see if I can find it. Otherwise, I can try to edit. So we should make a statement here then. Or comments. Let's see.
Here on this ticket.
It's rather on the other one above in the project list there. I would say consider taking advantage. Yeah, that one. I think some statement there that we should be. Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah. Should we state something that we should maybe at least make a reference or a note somewhere in the primer or somewhere in our documentation on how we relate to that terminology in some way? Good.
Okay.
But
right.
about abbreviations, what we say this, should we remove that from 0.1 scope? I guess it.
I
could
would
be to
remove
report.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, we can still do it, but I think having it in the project is maybe a sign that we want to have that as like mandatory things that we want to do. So I would remove this.
Good. And that's one we just talked about.
Yeah. Okay, so we still have to add that note. So,
yeah.
And this one, shall we? Oh, we can keep this open until the PR is merged. But yeah, okay. I think the only thing left are the SDKs, and I had a couple of items in the agenda for those. So maybe we can switch to the SDKs. Okay, so in terms of Go SDK, I'm working on a PR that aligns with the versioning as it is in the spec and adds any missing field. And once that is done, we'll make another PR to basically do the version switch, so set the version to 0.1.0 as opposed to 0.1.0.draft. And once that version is in there, I guess the only remaining thing would be to make a tag so that we create a release for the SDK. Yeah, the thing that I'm doing there, I used to have the schemas in the Go SDK as well. So in the PR that I'm working on, I'm removing the schemas from the Go SDK and taking the schemas from the spec repo using a Git submodule. So that basically I can run the test directly against the schema that we have in the spec to make sure that we are aligned there. Yeah, that's all I have on the Go SDK. Any comment, question on that? No. Eric, do you want to say something about the Python one?
Yeah, the Python SDK has quite a bit more work left than the Go SDK. Basically, what we have is we have this data type that matches the specification. As far as I know, they are all correct. And based on quick inspection, it seems like it produces JSON that matches the schema, but obviously this needs to be tested more. Then there's a bunch of things that is not implemented. One is parsing, which is obviously something we would like to do. I have a feeling that that might be a bit more complex. I'm really jealous, Andrea, by the way. It seems like in Go, you can just add like schema information in the code, basically, which looks really nice. There is no such thing in Python, as far as I can see, at least.
Okay.
So yeah, a bit more hands-on there. But the main thing that is missing, I think, is the actual mapping to cloud events. So right now we can produce the JSON, like a data block, basically, but we don't set the correct cloud events subject and those kind of things. Hopefully that is not too complex. I hope that I don't need to like do a lot of special mapping between different types of event and what the subject and context I can use. Or yeah, because I think I pick them from the same place all over for all events. And also we don't really have any transport binding. So right now the SDK can only be used to produce these JSON blobs. Basically, you can't send anything anywhere. But I think I can take that from the code that Tarek has written already. So mainly what I've done is just introducing the data types. And then of course, README. I misunderstood what you meant by versioning before, Andrea. I said it not for 0.1. I thought it referred to having support for multiple versions at the same time. But that will not be in place for 0.1 for the Python SDK, at least. It will just support one version. Yes.
Yes, I think that's fine. I mean, we do only have one version, and same for the Go SDK. So, but yeah, starting with the next version.
Yes. And yeah, as tends to happen in my life, I started this on Sunday with a plan to be done quite soon, because I thought I have some time left over. But then the whole universe crashed down around me. So I can say now that the way it looks like now, the absolute earliest I can be done with this is this coming Sunday or early next week. So if we intend to claim that Python SDK is part of 0.1, or either we should not claim that, or we should not release until next week. So just so you're aware, I will add a note on that. Yes, that's pretty much what I have.
Okay.
So how crucial is it that we might not have this in place for the CD Summit then? Is it? I mean, it's. I guess you come quite a lot further with the Python SDK than Jalander and others are done with the Java SDK, but we there wrote that the Java SDK is being worked on, but not done for 0.1. We could do the same for this if we, I mean, so we don't say things that are not true, but if we are almost there, I think it might be okay to state that we have it.
So just, I know we discussed this, but I've forgotten the timing. When would we like to make the release announcement? I think we mentioned the 21st at some point.
It's the press
25th.
release is going out on the 25th. Yes.
25th. Okay, but then there is at least a chance. So yeah, but then I will just continue to focus as much on this as I can.
Okay. I mean that's fine for me. I mean, I guess we could also do it such as like incremental. I mean, if you can produce valid JSON, you can still use the Cloud Event SDK to add that JSON into a Cloud Event.
Yeah.
So that could be a first stage, and then adding the Cloud Events it in as a second step.
Yeah, I think that is a really good way to do it. So for me, not to try to get all of this done at the same time, but focus on like, okay, now we have at least some value. So if at least someone can use this to send a valid CD event, that's a good start. And then maybe parsing can just be something we will have to add a little bit later. And as you say, transport, yeah, I will think about something there to go sort of minimum viable product or whatever it's called.
Yeah, so maybe we can have like a README that reflects what is available today, and then as we add features,
yes,
it gets updated, and then we can decide on the 20 or before the 25th, depending on what's in the README, what is available, if we are okay doing at 0.1, or if you want to wait a little bit.
That sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, thanks a lot for the work on this, Eric.
Yeah, it's only sad that I didn't have the possibility to start it sooner, but that's usually how it is, unfortunately.
All right. Anything else on SDKs? Okay, sounds like I know. We still have 20 minutes. Maybe we can use the time to discuss a bit about the website. I mean, we have this idea of improving our website, and I think it would make sense to make it a bit more narrowed down so that we can actually plan for it. So sorry, I didn't prepare this agenda item. But I think we. Okay, so this is just the ticket number. Maybe we can add on this. So things that I had in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, you did write some ideas somewhere. Was that in the chat on there, or where was those things?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'd like to have like polished content, so mainly the text in the spec. I think it would need some editorial reviews. So most of us are not native English speakers, so it's good to have some review on that as well, even though we do our best to review the content. But I think it would be valuable to have someone going through the content and someone who is not like deep in the specification to make sure that by reading the website specification, you can understand what it's about, or if there are holes and if things can be expressed better.
Yeah, I think that goes both for the overall intro text and the primer, which explains some concepts, but also maybe the specification itself. So I think there are 3 parts of it. And of course, the overall, the introduction text should of course be understandable by almost anyone. And the primer might require some more understanding of the subject. And then the spec itself, of course, then you need to more or less understand the primer before you can understand the spec.
So introduction text, you mean what we have here?
Yeah, this is what we have here, yeah. Maybe it should be expanded a bit. No, but
Yes.
yeah. There is probably things from our README MD page in the GitHub project we could take in there or something like that as well to expand it a bit and make some very short paragraphs on what is this all about in a very simplistic manner.
So if I can jump in here,
Go ahead.
when you're publishing like this, it really helps to have a sort of narrative journey for the user. And right now, what you've got is a lot of content and quality at the end of the journey, but there's not enough to actually suck the reader in at the beginning to get them to invest in reading that content. So I think one of the key pieces that needs to be done is to first of all highlight what's the difficult challenge that you're actually trying to address with this, what's the problem that you're solving, and then spell out how that affects the person who's reading the document, say what's in it for them and what might happen to them if they don't go down that route, and then move into the explanation of what the detail of the solution is.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And I think a lot of that information could be taken from the white paper, if nothing else. I mean, we have quite a lot of information there, but of course it needs to be condensed and made even crisper probably than how it's stated there. But that's at least a source of information to look into when writing this text.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense to me as well. Okay, so we need to set up a reader journey or more polished content than in the various section. I guess expand the content on the homepage is probably part of this then.
So I think the content is generally good and quite readable, but it is very wordy. So some of the audience will struggle to engage because it's just a wall of text. So one of the things to consider is diagram content and how much of this can we translate into architectural diagrams and simple block diagrams or sketches, so that you can get the meaning across in more than one way.
Yeah, I would very
it's
much like
nice.
that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice with this sort of complex, very specific content to give people the same information in 2 or 3 different ways, where they can cross-check their understanding against those different ways of saying the same thing. So if you give, a text description, a diagram, and a code example, then you have the ability to cross-check your understanding against those 3 different things, and therefore discover whether the mental model that you're building is actually consistent with what the narrative is intended to be.
Yeah, sounds great.
So what would it take then for us to go from where we are today to this kind of content? I mean, do we need to kind of draft or sketch the diagrams and have a review of the content that we have in there? Do you think, Terry, there is enough content in there to try and draw the diagrams from it, or?
I think probably with this, one of the things that you would do early on in the process is, if you like, a gap analysis to say, okay, this piece feels like it needs more detail, or this piece feels like it needs a supporting diagram, and then go through and pin those in the narrative. Because at the same time, you can have too many pictures, and then you end up with a lot of scrolling. So you really want to get a nice flow through the document, so that people are moving through images and blocks of text in a way that makes it very easy for them to read and understand comfortably what's going on. And that's certainly something I can help out with if that's what you need. The other thing that I suggest that needs consideration up front is how you want to publish to this view. You know, what's the relationship between the specifications that you have in the Git repo and the information that you're publishing on the website? Which of those is the official release, and what process do you want to use for managing and maintaining that ongoing release of information? Because that will tell you a lot about the structure of what you might need to put in place within the website.
I see. Yeah, I mean, what we have today, I mean, except for the homepage, basically, the spec is displayed on the website. So we basically publish things on the spec repo, and it's then synced on a nightly basis to the website. So that's how it works today. I mean, I guess we could have some part of the content hosted on the website if it makes sense, or we could have in the spec repo some documents which are dedicated to be like introductory content that is then hosted on the website and then linked to the like full reference.
So it's not necessarily right or wrong either way, but you need to sort of just bear in mind the constraints that so if what you're doing is automatically releasing the spec from another repository, then you're going to have very limited ability to play with the styling and look and feel of that in the published document. So so that means that the spec itself might be harder to read, and therefore you might need other supporting documentation around it to provide, you know, extra information or clarification, or, you know, if we're going to put diagrams, then we're not going to be able to put those diagrams in the spec. We're going to have a narrative and then a specification as separate pieces.
I mean, we could have diagrams in this spec as well. I don't see anything wrong with that, but yeah, I think it's probably a different kind of content. So I mean, like the specification is like a reference where we say exactly what needs and needs not to be in the event. So it probably makes sense to have separate documents.
So an example of a challenge that you're likely to hit is that getting complex content to render correctly in GitHub and in Doxy can be quite challenging. So you can end up in a situation where you can read it in the GitHub view, but then when you export it to Doxy, it's not rendering correctly. And if you try and fix that, then it breaks it in GitHub.
Yeah.
So keeping those things as simple as possible will reduce the amount of ongoing maintenance that's needed. But at the same time, we also need to have a document that's attractive enough to get people to read it in the first place. Now, this is where the sort of the user journey comes back into play, because what you can do potentially is structure things so that you're moving the reader between a narrative section and a specification section and another narrative section, so that you're giving them proprietary concepts that they need to read part of the specification, and then you're giving them the spec so that they can then dive into the detail of it, but potentially breaking that up into bite-sized chunks so that it's easier to absorb.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's not too far away from the structure we have today with the primer and the spec. So the primer is like a non-reference document where we give more like architecture or overview of what CDEvents is and try to, give our higher level understanding of what this is about. And then the spec is, we link into the spec from there occasionally. And so that's, but yeah, we could have a more formal user journey. I guess the primer has grown kind of organically until now. So it's not really something planned as a journey today. So, it's, yeah, that's something that
So
definitely would.
The other way to think about this is in terms of the audience strategy. So it helps to have some understanding of who the customer is for this document, and also to consider the fact that you might actually have multiple audiences and need to address a different style of content to each audience. So that can also be the same audience, but at a different stage in their life cycle. Typically, if someone is exploring a new idea, what they want is a fairly lightweight explanation of the basic concepts before they decide whether or not they're going to commit to actually drilling into this deep enough to implement the spec. So it's probably best to think about that as at least two different audiences. So you've got a browsing audience who may or may not be fully conversant with all of the issues. And then you're going to have a highly technical audience that does understand the issues, who are looking for, reference implementation pointers, because they're planning to actually do something with this specification. And those typically are not comfortable bedfellows. So you need to split that content up so that you're allowing people to comfortably browse and get the concepts without scaring them off with too much detailed specification.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's, I mean, what we have today is the white paper. That's, it's a PDF hosted in our Git repo for now. But that's, I think, what Emma was saying. I mean, we could try and get some of that content that we have in the white paper that's meant for more like browsing type of audience, or someone who wants to know what CDEvents are and decide is there something interesting for me or not, to dive in. And then, yeah, so the primer, I guess, it's more gives you dives more, gives you more architecture decisions and how we do things, and the specification is the reference where you go and look for, like, yeah, I'm implementing these. Is this aligned with the spec or not? Okay. Yeah, we are at time now, but thanks a lot, Terry. I think this is very good coverage of what we need to do.
Yeah, I think
maybe
that that list will be very valuable going forward.
Yeah. So the main concerns that we have, I think, that we discussed are like, we do want to do this. We have very limited bandwidth on our side in terms of, you know, work that we're doing ourselves to make this happen. But yeah, we would really like this to take place. So we have this budget from the TOC, and it would be good to use it. So maybe we can discuss what is the minimum work that needs to happen from the CDEvents team to make it possible for this to start, or at least to be estimated as a project.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, we are 2 minutes past. I need to go to the next meeting. But
yeah,
we can continue to sync offline as well.
yes, sounds good.
All right. Good to see everyone. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.